We will start with a presentation of the colors by the Diplomatic Security Color Guard. So please, everyone, stand for the colors, and then join us for the State Department's T-Tones choral group for the national anthem. And please remain standing until the color guard exits the hall. Good evening. I'm Bob Silverman, President of the American Foreign Service Association, and I am, on behalf of AFSA, very pleased and thank you for joining us in celebrating our 90th birthday, which is the 90th anniversary of the Foreign Service and of its professional association, AFSA. Before we begin the dinner, I'd like to recognize the many distinguished guests here. Let us give a round of applause for Senator Richard Lugar and Congressman Chris Van Hollen. Thank you for your support of the Foreign Service. And let's also thanks and give welcome to the senior Senate and House staff members who are here from our Appropriations and Authorization Committees. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service. Finally, I would like to recognize 7 individual members of the Foreign Service as a group. They are our career ambassadors who continue to inspire all of us today. Please hold your applause until I call their names. Hank Cohen, Ruth Davis, Ryan Crocker, Mark Grossman, Bill Burns, Jim Jeffrey, and Tom Shannon. Round of applause for us. Friends, we are an overseas service. 2/3 of our colleagues at any one time are assigned overseas, so it is entirely appropriate as we begin the evening to remember them. They are about 9,500 members of the Foreign Service, serving in about 285 posts. They are our heroes, exposed to danger every day. Over the years, 245 of our colleagues have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to country overseas. This evening, we pass their names etched upon the walls in the lobby below. And we must also thank our family members for their sacrifices for service overseas. Many foreign service family members are here tonight, so let's also give a round of applause to those family members. They are also our heroes. 6 persons made this evening possible, and I would like to recognize them as a group. They are Acting Director General of the Foreign Service Hans Klem, AFSA Executive Director Ian Houston, Ambassador Mark Grossman, who mentored the AFSA team, former AFSA President Susan Johnson, who conceived the idea for this dinner, and finally, the great AFSA team of Christy Palmies and Lily Wall-Tucko, who brought it all together. Thank you, AFSA team. Now I would like to invite you to enjoy the dinner, and we have a fabulous program afterwards, Secretary Colin Powell and many others. So please enjoy the dinner, and we'll see you afterwards.
Silverman and Andrea Mitchell of NBC News.
Hello, everyone. As promised, we have a wonderful program for you this evening. So without further ado, let's get started. I wanted to quickly remind everyone why we're here tonight. To celebrate the accomplishments of the women and the men who have served and are serving our country in the foreign service over the past 9 decades. On May 24, 1924, Congress passed the Rogers Act. It created a distinct foreign service personnel system under which the Secretary of State continues to assign diplomats abroad today. Foreign service members founded AFSA in that same year. And AFSA has evolved over the decades to be both a labor union and a professional association, thanks to the leadership of many people in this room here tonight. AFSA's core mission, as the voice of the Foreign Service, is to promote the career diplomats and development professionals, collectively and individually, and to make the case in the public that the Foreign Service is vital to our country's national interests. I speak for the AFSA board, for all of the staff, and for the dozens of volunteers on AFSA's committees to say it is an honor and a privilege to pursue that mission. 90, on the face of it, is a very impressive number. In reality, that number makes us both young and old. We all know people who have reached the venerable age of 90. And so tonight, I would like to recognize 3 lifetime AFSA members who are with us and who are each older than the Foreign Service itself. So please join me in a round of applause for Ambassador and former Director General Joan Clark. Ambassador Bruce Langdon, who led our mission in Tehran at a difficult time. And Ambassador Alan Lukens, the father of himself an ambassador and the father of a current ambassador to Senegal, Louis Lukens. In historic terms, 90 years is the blink of an eye. That makes us a young profession that can build on the successes of the past and continue to redefine ourselves for the future. In that spirit, I would also like to recognize our youngest AFSA member, still finishing her A100 class and getting ready for her first assignment, and she is Stephanie Parenti. So I propose to dedicate this dinner both to celebrating our past and to recommitting ourselves to service. Service in support of an innovative, professional, and diverse foreign service leading our 21st century diplomacy. One one person who epitomizes our profession today is the son himself of a Foreign Service officer named Richard Carey, and he is none other than John Kerry, Secretary of State. The Secretary has gained our admiration and support for tackling our toughest diplomatic assignments, and he relentlessly moves the ball forward to strike diplomatic goals. As this photo attests, he is also setting new standards for multitasking and for reaching new standards of multiculturalism. He can also talk on the cell phone and kick a ball at the same time. So, Mr. Secretary, we all wonder who was on the phone with you at that moment, and maybe we'll hear. So please welcome Secretary of State John Kerry.
Well, Bob, thank you very, very much. Thank you and your team at AFSA for everything that you do for all of the men and women of the Foreign Service. Welcome to this magnificent Ben Franklin room. I've been fond of reminding people that in this day and age, Ben Franklin has never been confirmed for anything. And not just because of the gridlock. I thought that was a very private moment out there. Somebody was kidding me. I was taking out my frustration on the ball. I will not tell you who I was on the phone with. That's diplomacy. It's really special for me to be able to be here with all of you from our 90-year-olds who are older than the service itself, ambassadors. Thank you for gracing us with your presence here. To our youngest, where everything is in the future, she gets out her cell phone and does what everybody does, which is, Instagram, tweet, I'm sure it'll be a selfie before the night is over. I had a spectacular dinner last night in Mexico City, in which we were serenaded by some mariachi band. And it was great. I had a great time. But it's my understanding Senator Lugar used to play cello, so Dick, there's pressure on you here tonight. Absolutely. Before I went to Mexico this week, I had the great honor of delivering the commencement addresses at both Boston College and at Yale University, my alma mater. And I want you all to know they were both very different experiences. It's nice to be in front of a diplomatic audience. But it was really interesting. At Yale, when it was announced that I was going to speak, in the Yale Daily News, a number of people quickly contacted the Yale Daily News to comment. And I went online and checked the comment section. And one of the first comments I read was, make sure you drink a 5-hour energy to keep you awake. And I promised them all I wouldn't speak 1 minute more than 4 hours. And I did. Then another one said, well, he hasn't screwed up the Secretary of State badly yet. I told them, stay tuned. And then finally, this was the best of all, somebody said, I'm really proud that a Yale is Secretary of State. And then I thought I should have stopped reading there. I didn't. I read on. It said, but he is butt ugly. So this is a relief. No comment section. At any rate, if those two public addresses were intimidating, I have to tell you, this one is even more so in many ways because it's like going to the dean's office. I've got the dean emeritus of the United States Senate Foreign Policy, and Dick Lugar. We have the dean of Washington Media and Foreign Policy, Andrew Mitchell. I've got the dean of the in-house judges of what we do, and Bill Burns here. And when he gets here, Colin Powell is on a flight from New York, I am told. But just knowing Colin Powell was going to be here, he's the dean of things that are great and good and American about America. I think everybody would agree with that. So I thank Andrea for hosting. I think Andrea and I have known each other for about 25 or 30 years or something.
Since I was a baby.
That's why she does so well. The art of diplomacy. I first got to know her when I was a freshman senator. And one of the things that I really grew to respect and appreciate about her was, yes, she chased the story, and yes, she wanted to get the truth. But you know what? She always wanted to tell the story the way it really was. And as a reporter, it wasn't just a question of breaking the story, it was getting the story right. That is cherished in anybody today, and I think that's exactly what journalism should bring to covering the world today. A very complicated world. She's traveled with me on a number of trips. She is a pioneer among women in journalism, and she's so invested in helping to tell the story of American diplomacy that she's agreed to be here with us tonight, and we're very grateful for your privilege. Thank you. This is also I also want to thank Bob Silverman, and he's the one who asked me to join you, and I'm very privileged to be here to celebrate 90 extraordinary years. He works very, very closely with all of us on the Senate floor and throughout the department, and his advocacy and his partnership have really made an enormous difference in very recently breaking gridlock with the United States Senate in helping to get a whole bunch of our folks confirmed. And the truth is that we now have thousands of Foreign Service officers who are commissioned, tenured, and promoted. And Bob is a guy who was really central in helping to bring it home to our senators and make it happen. So thank you. I also want to thank Hans Clem. Hans has served the State Department extremely well as the acting Director General of the Foreign Service. He's a great manager, he's a great recruiter, and he listens carefully, which is a key to being, I think, a great Director General. And I want to thank him for the job that he has done in DG's office. I'm also pleased that Colin accepted to be here, and I know it's never easy flying. There he is, Colin Powell, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Obviously, not just a great diplomat, but a great politician. He times his arrival. I've had the pleasure of working with Colin Powell when I was senator for those many years in his many different jobs. I always think about him as a guy who served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. But I also think about how he rose up through the ranks to become the youngest and the first African-American chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I think of his leadership during that critical period of time under President George Herbert Walker Bush, when he rolled back what Saddam Hussein thought he could get away with. And Colin, we are forever indebted and grateful for your leadership. But especially, I thank you because I really try to emulate you with respect to the personal role you played here in the department in making sure that the troops have a sense of direction and that you're connected to them. And I appreciate that, as everybody here. I want to say a couple of words, if I can, about a fellow who's been around here for a while, 32 years in the Foreign Service. He has worked for 10 Secretaries of State. If there's anybody today in the ranks of professional diplomacy who epitomizes the qualities that you look for, the leadership, the steady hand, the quiet diplomacy, the ability to work through difficult issues calmly, and who leads by example and by sort of quiet steadiness, if you will, is Bill Burns. Bill, he doesn't just understand where policy ought to go, but he understands the politics of it all and how to work through it. And it's really exemplary. I'm also really proud of the team that we have assembled here at the State Department for the second term of the Obama administration. I'm grateful to the President for his willingness to bring on board a lot of the folks that we thought could really help make a difference as we go forward in the foreign policy of our country. Tom Shannon has gratefully agreed to serve as the counselor of the department. And I'm very proud of the fact that Tom is just the 7th Foreign Service officer to hold that post, including legends like Chip Bolin and George Kennan, and the first one to do so in 32 years. So I'm glad he is doing that. We have leaders like Ann Patterson, Victoria Newland, Linda Thomas Greenfield, who left a post she loved to take on a post that I asked her to take on, difficult, and who is now serving Assistant Secretary for Africa and African Affairs. And I also think we've built a team that is capable of advancing American foreign policy effectively. I'm also happy to see my former chairman occasionally. Thank God it was only occasionally, because that gave us a chance. And ranking member, he was ranking member in my last years as chairman, Dick Lugar, who, whether it was nuclear weapons reduction, proliferation, treaty after treaty, energy policy, food security, the linkage of agriculture to American foreign policy, Dick was always there and always, importantly, looking for a way to try to find a bipartisan approach, a nonpartisan, apolitical way of solving problems. And Dick, every single one of us are grateful that you have been a terrific statesman for years. Thank you very, very much. We have with us also a friend of mine from the United States Congress. We worked very hard together on the special committee to try to deal with the budget. He knows the budget as well as anybody, but he also knows foreign policy as well as anybody. It's fitting that someone who was born in Karachi, grew up in Sri Lanka, now represents so many people who are part of the Foreign Service family. And on issues that matter to all Americans, whether it's climate change or the minimum wage or immigration, Chris Van Hollen is front and center in making sure that America stays true to our values and to our responsibilities in the world. And we're grateful to Chris for that. I'm also I just looked down, I see my good friend Tom, Mary Beth, Regina Smettinghoff are here tonight. There are two families here tonight who understand the risks of service within the ranks of the Foreign Service better than anybody. And I'm very grateful that Tom, Mary Beth, and Regina Smettinghoff and Adam Tomasek are here. I've gotten to know Tom and Mary Beth and their daughter Regina in the last year. I was able to stop off and visit them very briefly after we all heard the terrible news of the loss of Anne. We met in Chicago at the airport. They were very kind to come briefly, and we did a quick stop off. And I was blessed to have them console me more than I consoled them. But we're very, very proud of what Regina is doing, carrying on for Anne in the State Department. And we thank them profoundly for being here, and the work that Tony Tomasek was doing for USAID in Haiti, equally exemplary, extraordinary, totally in keeping with the spirit of both adventure, but most importantly, that special thing that brings people here to try to make the world safer, make the world better, and make a difference, and help other people by bringing our values and our beliefs to them in the best of ways. And And so we thank you for precisely the gift that we celebrate in the Foreign Service. Thank you very much. I've almost overstayed my welcome. I'm not going to do the 5-hour interview thing on you. But I want to say a few words. We're generally done sort of who we are, where we're going here, and then turn it over to Andrea, and we can eat. 90 years ago, the Foreign Service was just absolutely unrecognizable compared to what it is today. Back then, we had fewer than 700 Foreign Service officers, and now we have more than 13,000. Back then, we had no female chiefs of mission, none. Now we have more than 40, and I'm proud to tell you that right now in this department, 5 out of 6 of our regional assistant secretaries are women. 4 out of 6 of our undersecretaries are women. And we are joined tonight, since we have 2 deputy secretaries of state, 50% are women. And one of them is here, Heather Higginbottom, sitting right over here. So, back then, when it started, we had only 1 African-American Foreign Service officer. 1. A man named Clifton Wharton. I happen to know of him way back when because my dad actually worked for him way back in those early days. Now we have nearly 1,000 African-American Foreign Service officers following in his footsteps. It all started, as Bob reminded us, with a congressman by the name of John Rogers, who I'm proud to say hailed from Massachusetts. And what he had seen in war as a private in the Army seared in him the price that we pay when we don't solve conflicts peacefully. So he set out to build a modern Foreign Service precisely to try to prevent wars and to try to provide a Foreign Service that was as strong in diplomacy as our military is in its capacity to wage a war. It wasn't easy. He proposed bill after bill. He summoned testimony. He drafted literally dozens of op-eds. And it took 7 years to pass the Rogers Act. Isolationism and austerity ran deep. Then, as now, the temptations of turn inwards and to retreat from the world was gaining ground. But he got it done. And he kept pushing, and in 1924, House Resolution 6357 passed Congress, and it gave birth to the modern Foreign Service. Now, to quote Rogers, "The promise of good diplomacy is the greatest protector of peace." And our hope is that people will recognize that 90 years from that moment, that is exactly what the Foreign Service has done. One of the greatest rewards of being Secretary of State, I will tell you, I'm sure Tom would agree, is because of our travel and because we interact with all of you and with people around the world, we get to see this every single day. We get to see people going out and making a difference. I said yesterday in Mexico City when I met with all of the embassy that they really are the envy of other people because they get to wake up every single morning believing and loving what they do when they go to work because they know they're going to make a difference. Not everybody gets to do that. And so it is really a special thing to be part of this family. And if you just look at last year, I asked you to measure what our diplomacy is doing. I know I listened to the, to political currents, the people who try to drag you down by asserting that you're not doing enough, or you didn't go to war where you should have, or whatever it is. But we're getting things done. And we're getting them done in the best traditions of what diplomacy is supposed to do, diplomacy. People are angry because we didn't strike Syria at one instant. But guess what? Today, 92% of all the chemical weapons in Syria are out and being destroyed, and the other 8% will get out. That never would have occurred otherwise. Likewise, in Africa, we are on the brink of we have negotiated an agreement with M23 2023, one of the factions in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is disarming, and we have agreement from all the parties to move forward and build a political future. And now to sort of end these years of war. In South Sudan, once again, a struggle that Colin and others have been part of for a long time. We moved the parties, we're starting to separate them, begin to build the possibility, bringing the UN and other troops to the table and trying to make peace. Same thing in Mali, same thing in other parts of the world. In Afghanistan, we just had an extraordinary election result. Not crowing yet, it's not over yet, but that's how you do this. Step by step, by building things and keeping faith with the sacrifices people make to help get you there. So we have another election that hopefully will mark a real transition and an opportunity for Afghans to determine their future. In Iran, we are, contrary to the naysayers who said you don't negotiate, you can't negotiate, we are. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to get a result. It doesn't mean we're going to get where we want to go. But if and when we have to do something to assert our interests properly for the world, it will be only after we have exhausted all of the possibilities of diplomacy and all of the remedies available to us. That's what diplomacy is supposed to do. And I could run to many other parts of the world where America and Americans are making a difference. As I said to the graduates over the weekend, I don't think a lot of people are really lying awake at night hoping that America will leave where we are. Most of them are worried about whether or not we might. They're asking us to be there. Boko Haram, Nigeria. Only the United States is there offering the assistance to help find those young women. Other countries not only aren't there invited, but they didn't even offer. That's a difference. And I think it's a difference worth dwelling on. We were the first people on the ground in the Philippines, ahead of countries that lived right in the neighborhood. We were there with our armed forces' ability to move goods and helping people to be able to restore their community. We are about to see the first AIDS-free generation in Africa. Colin Powell helped begin that journey. And I remember back in the 90s when Bill Frist and I worked with him in order to try to do that. Now we're on the brink of something that we never would have imagined back then. It was a death sentence. Now it's a possibility for life and a whole new generation that will be free from that scourge. So everywhere I travel, my friends, from Bogota to Baghdad to Beijing to Boston, I just stole that one. When I'm here at home, I really feel the importance of what we are doing and the difference that we can make. I've seen us create diplomatic opportunity in so many countries. I've seen us make a difference on the ground with education exchanges, education programs, medical assistance, help, engagement, development, USAID, you name it. And we are trying to show people the story of American diplomacy. Harry Truman, George Marshall led America's efforts to rebuild Europe against the will of many people in the country. It wasn't popular in Congress. But think today, how many people would say that is something that we shouldn't have done? Building the unbelievable alliances and strength of the democracies as a result. So I just close by saying to you that there's something special about being American. It really is different. You think about almost any other country in the world, and almost all of them are defined by bloodline, or defined by ethnicity, or defined by lines that were drawn in a peace agreement or in the end of colonialism, or by leaders like Winston Churchill and others sitting in a room and this will be this and this will be that. Not America. We must never forget that what makes America different from other nations is not a common bloodline. It's not a common religion or a common ideology or a common heritage. It's actually, what makes us different is actually an uncommon idea. That all men are created equal and that everybody has these unalienable rights. We are an idea. Unlike other countries, we are an idea. And in our idea, every American gets to fill it out, define it over time. So that's what the quality of good diplomacy is. It's filling out the idea and exporting it to other people in the world. And we are working, all of us together, to try to create order where there is none, to bring stability out of chaos, to fix what is broken, and to make this complicated world just a little bit less complicated and a lot more free. And that's really worth the effort. Thank you all for being part of it.
Thank you, Secretary Kerry. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce our MC for the evening. We are fortunate to welcome Andrea Mitchell, someone who knows this crowd very well and who knows many of our breeds better than we do. She has been NBC's Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent since 1994, and before that, she covered the White House and Congress. We are honored to have you this evening. Thank you, Madam Director.
Thank you, Bob, and a special thank you to Secretary Kerry for your entirely too generous remarks. Thank you so much. I mean, as much as I love chasing around after presidents and covering nuclear arms deals with Ronald Reagan and covering the Senate, I really have loved the passion for foreign service and diplomacy and covering six secretaries of state. So it's been a wonderful career, and thank you for the generosity of your remarks. And I think and look out at the women who are deputy secretaries and the women ambassadors, and think about how this place has changed. Still some more change to come, but looking out at the women in this room, I just want to, it occurs to me an anecdote just before Madeleine Albright was being sworn in, we were doing advanced work on what some of her goals were. And we had a very candid conversation, and I don't think she would mind my posing now after all these years. But she said one of her goals was to try to deal with gender equity in the Foreign Service. And that was a big challenge. So as I wrote my story that night for the nightly news after she was sworn in, one of the things I put into the story, it was pretty well sourced, was that one of her goals was to deal with the long history of gender discrimination in the Foreign Service. And I immediately, the phone started ringing like crazy. Two of her aides, both men, called me sequentially to complain about the story, saying that there was no discrimination in the State Department. And I said to myself, wait till you guys find out what's about to hit you now. So there was some pleasure in that. Thank you, Bob, as well, and to all of you for welcoming here today. It obviously strikes you that the presence of Secretary Kerry just back from Mexico on a brief stopover on all of his trips here in Washington, here tonight, signifies just how important you and your service and diplomacy and your mission is to him, celebrating the 90th anniversary of American diplomacy and the Foreign Service. So happy birthday to all of you. Also because, as he has said in embassies around the world where I've been, as he departs each country, he has shared some of his stories as a boy in Berlin, getting on his bicycle and going over to the eastern sector. That wasn't exactly what he had in mind with an 11 or 12-year-old crossing over to the communist side, but he's had the experience of growing up in the Foreign Service and understands this unique culture and this unique sense of service. We're also honored, of course, by the presence of so many of you, and seeing all of you, the ambassadors, Bill Burns, John McConnelly, and all the people I've so long admired, and Colin Powell. We did so much, as Secretary Kerry said, to inspire the loyalty and the dedication of the department during his leadership here. I was going to say about General Powell in a few moments, and the others that I've introduced, but I wanted to explain with NBC News, I've had a front row of history, able to observe and interact with you, with the best and the brightest, the men and women of our foreign service. 24 hours a day, no matter what the threat to your personal security or sacrifice to your families, which is considered. You have represented American values in the far corners of the world. From Beirut to Baghdad, from Nairobi and Dar es Salaam to Cairo and Kiev, you are the American flag. Only last year in Kabul, I saw firsthand how Anne Lettingham, already showing brilliance that foretold what should have been a stellar career, devoted herself to the transition to come in Afghanistan, and to Regina and to Anne's parents. I just want to say your spirit, your dedication, despite its hugest loss, is just so inspiring to all the rest of us. And it's wonderful that you were here and to add in comments what Tony was accomplishing in Haiti as well. I remember so clearly the service of Robert Frazier and Joseph Kuzel and Nelson Drew during those long days and nights working for Dick Holbrook. And you know how long the days and nights could be working for Dick Holbrook. In Dayton, negotiating the accords, and then when we went to Paris and they were signed, and just how painful the loss was on that dangerous road to Sarajevo. As a young correspondent, I camped out overnight on the floor of our cubicle downstairs, weekends and holidays, long before the years of advent of cable news and the internet. We were, in 1979, waiting for any word, day and night. And as the junior correspondent, it was my job to be here on the overnight shift, waiting for the release of our hostages in Tehran. We felt that we had gotten to know them personally, all of their stories, long before their glorious homecoming. I do want to recognize Ambassador Bruce Langan, the most senior U.S. Foreign Service officer held in Iran for those 444 days. And it is the dedication and the vision of all of you, all of the men and women over the past 40 years in times of conflict and peace who uphold the standard of excellence of the United States around the world, and we thank you all. And now I'd like to introduce Representative Chris Van Hollen, who brings a unique perspective to Congress as one of the few members to truly understand the Foreign Service. His parents, Ambassador Christopher Van Hollen and Eliza Van Hollen, traveled the world as ambassador in Sri Lanka and the Maldives, bringing their young son-in-law. He's become a true friend, a supporter of diplomacy and development in the House of Representatives, where he represents, of course, his district in Maryland, a place that many of you call home. So please welcome Congressman Chris Van Hollen for a few remarks. I know that
Thank you, Andrea, and I want to start by joining Secretary Kerry in thanking Andrea Mitchell for being here this evening, but also for her excellent reporting on a host of issues, including foreign policy issues. And I think we all know that in the age of tweets and sound bites and fast-moving news, it's very difficult to put complicated foreign policy issues into context. And Andrea, thank you for doing it better than anybody, and we really appreciate all that you do to bring the story and the facts to the American people. It's a great honor to be here this evening for the 90th anniversary of the creation of the American Foreign Service Association. I want to thank Bob Silverman and his team at AFSA for all their leadership and good work, and to all the men and women of the Foreign Service for their dedicated service to our country. Year in and year out, for 90 years plus, you have been on the front lines of American diplomacy, engaging our friends and foes around the world. And I want to thank you, Secretary Kerry, for your leadership. As the Secretary indicated, we worked on some tough budget negotiations on Capitol Hill, and I guess the Secretary didn't think that was difficult enough, because he's gone on from trying to do budget negotiations on Capitol Hill to negotiations in the Middle East and even tougher problems around the world. But we couldn't be more fortunate in this country to have somebody with Secretary Kerry's experience, knowledge, stick-to-itiveness, and perseverance as our Secretary of State. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. And as another, what we affectionately call Foreign Service brat, we're so proud to have one of our own here heading up the State Department. I also want to thank and salute Senator Lugar for his service. Many years ago, I had the privilege of working on foreign policy issues for a great Maryland senator, Senator Mac Mathias. And Mac Mathias served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee when Senator Lugar was the chairman. And I remember very well those days because Senator Lugar led the effort to impose economic sanctions on South Africa because of their racist apartheid regime. And he persevered despite the fact that there was a president in the White House from his own party who opposed that effort. So thank you, Senator Lugar, for all you do. You're a great role model for anybody. And to Secretary Powell, thank you for your dedicated service. When you think of a statesman in the United States, in this century and last, Secretary Powell will always come to mind for your dedicated service in so many different capacities. And we're grateful to you for your continued service here since you left government service in terms of trying to make sure our kids all get an opportunity to get off to a good start in life and have opportunities. So thank you, Secretary Powell. Look, I'm very proud to be part of the extended Foreign Service family. My father served as a Foreign Service officer for over 25 years. And I must say, I know I'm a little biased, but he was a great Foreign Service officer. He was a great dad, and he was also a great Foreign Service officer. And I'd be remiss if I didn't salute many of the individuals who were introduced, who have been on this earth for more than 90 years and part of the Foreign Service who were introduced because they were all friends of the Van Hollen family who I've gotten to know so well over the years, and we thank you so much. As a consequence of the fact my dad was in the Foreign Service, I was born in Karachi, Pakistan. We lived in India, Turkey, and Sri Lanka, where my father served as ambassador, and the Maldives. And my mother was also a full partner in my father's diplomatic efforts. And it really underscores the fact that when you're in the Foreign Service, your family is a team in the Foreign Service. And my mother learned over 5 languages everywhere we went. She learned the language of the country. If you're keeping track, I mentioned 4 countries. She learned 5 languages. In India, as you know, they have many more than 1 language. And my mom picked up those languages. After my father left the Foreign Service and went to the Carnegie Endowment, my mother joined the Bureau of Intelligence Research, working on South Asian countries, and she was the chief analyst for Afghanistan in 1979 when the Soviets decided to invade. And I must say she was very prescient. She actually anticipated and predicted that, and also warned early on about the dangers the Taliban might bring if they were ever to come to power. So, as I say, my parents were a team together in the Foreign Service and after. And growing up in a Foreign Service family gives you a great appreciation for the energy, the talents, the creativity, the dedication that all of our Foreign Service officers and their families bring to the jobs, the risks they take, and the sacrifices they make to serve our country. I'm also grateful to all of you in the Foreign Service for putting up with so many of those Codels. They are always well-intentioned to get the facts, but I know you always hold your breath trying to make sure we don't create an international incident while we're overseas, but we thank you for that. And let me just say, with respect to Congress, and someone who serves on the Budget Committee, I can assure you I will continue to work hard and fight hard to make sure that the State Department receives the resources it needs to serve American interests and do its important work around the world. As Secretary Kerry indicated, it's always interesting, we know secretaries of state come up to Capitol Hill and talk about the importance of resources, and they're absolutely right. But when Secretary Powell was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and when Secretary Gates was Secretary of Defense, like Secretary Hagel today, when they come up to Capitol Hill, they also talk about the importance of the State Department budget, because as Secretary Kerry said, you got to focus not just on the defense D, but the other 3 Ds. You got to focus on diplomacy, on development, and our efforts to promote democracy around the world, because it is a lot smarter to focus on preserving stability and peace than fighting wars and instability around the world. And that is the job our Foreign Service officers do every day. We're grateful to you for that. Finally, like my colleagues and with my colleagues, we will work hard to make sure we have the resources to ensure that Foreign Service officers and Secretary Kerry said, all Americans serving our nation overseas have the security and protection that they need, the best in the world. But I also know from my own father and mother in the Foreign Service that you don't join the Foreign Service in order to be locked behind walled fortresses. You join the Foreign Service to engage with people from other countries and cultures, to get to know the politics of the place where you are, to represent the United States, to be our face to places around the world. And you take risks as a result for our nation. And I hope the Congress will support your full mission and your full role as Foreign Service officers. And all Americans should be grateful for what you do for our country. I know that our family is very grateful. When my dad passed away in January of last year, my sisters and I created an AFSA scholarship fund in memory of my mother and our father. And it was our small way of remembering how much my father and mother loved the Foreign Service, and also a small way of thanking those of you and your families who continue to serve our country in the Foreign Service. Thank you. God bless you. Congratulations on thanking you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Van Hollen, for all you do and for speaking about diplomacy and development and the important mission many here representing USAID, which is really the forefront of enormous progress around the world. Next, I'm pleased to introduce one of my oldest friends, strongest friends, a staunch ally of the Foreign Service in Congress, former Senator Richard Lugar. Senator Lugar served his home state of Indiana in the Senate for 36 years. I actually met him. Senator, you won't remember this, but he came to give a speech at Independence Hall, where I was a local reporter, in 1972. And you were the mayor of Indianapolis. And Congress and the President just signed into law, I think, revenue sharing. You were representing all the mayors of the nation. It was quite an interesting day, given the times and the protests and the federal court order, not because of you, but because of the President of the United States at the time. But you were someone I admired so much from that day on, and always in the Senate. Rising, of course, to be both chairman and ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, working alongside Senator Kerry. Senator Lugar really understands the demands of the Foreign Service career. He's always stood up for America's diplomats, for the resources they require to do their jobs. He's He's also a former recipient of AFSA's Award for Lifetime Contributions to American Diplomacy. Senator Lugar is now President and Chairman of the Lugar Senate. Welcome, Senator.
Andrea, how exciting it is once again to be with you, and I appreciate it so much. You're very well informed and intense coverage of foreign policy for almost 4 decades. And what a thrill it is to be with Secretary Powell, Secretary Kerry, 2 great secretaries of state who are all ready to express themselves so many times with all of you in the Foreign Service. And I'm sure you have the same affection and regard for it than I do. And President Silverman, great to be with you and your leadership of this great organization on its 90th anniversary. It was suggested that I might talk tonight as one who certainly imbibed in all of the goods that came out of embassies, including Foreign Service officers as well as ambassadors, during these so-called codels, that Christian Holland has mentioned. Let me just say that I've chosen one particular ambassador as exemplary of this evening. This is dangerous in the midst of all of the other great ambassadors whom I have such regard and many memories. But it's appropriate given the fact that a very important election is going to occur in this world in Ukraine on Sunday. And I selected some thoughts about John Hurt, who was our ambassador to Ukraine in 2004. He had already been our ambassador to Uzbekistan. He had come out of the Georgetown Foreign Service School, likewise Fletcher School, had joined the Foreign Service in 1979, and was a veteran of the trail already by the time he got to Ukraine. But on that particular occasion, out of the blue, and by that I mean about a week before an election was going to occur, it was to signify the beginning of the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, I got a call from the White House, and President Bush asked me to carry a letter personally to President Kuchma of Ukraine. And the mission was to inform President Kuchma, at least the letter was signified, that we took the election very seriously. We count on a free and fair election and all sorts of other stipulations. So I was honored by that assignment, dropped everything and went to Kiev and saw the president. He read the letter from our president and rather wearily laid it aside and said, my goodness, once again, we're having all this preaching from the Americans and what have you. And so it was not an overwhelming success, at least the letter, but we had done our duty. At that point, Ambassador Herbst really took over my life. He wanted to make certain that the remarks that I made were not only well informed, but likewise were likely to enhance the Orange Revolution and then move things along. So as a result, we went into an intensive course of instruction involving Foreign Service people, not only the embassy, but other people that he brought in from wherever they may have been. There were a good number of European countries sending observers to that election. We did not have a formal group as we often had in Latin American elections or elections subsequently. And this included going down to the place where the counting was going to occur, and reports would come in from all over the country. We were there about 10:30 at night, so all the screens that would be flashing with results and all the rest of this, talk to the people who would be involved in the counting and to gain their assurances. Let me just say that on the day of the election, we really toured the central part of the country, going to various polling situations, to old folks' homes, to all sorts of situations in which we were likely to see the conduct of the election. We saw a lot. As a matter of fact, at some of the old folks' homes, the old folks were not voting. There were sort of bands of people touring the country, going from home to home, voting in in lieu of these people. There were all sorts of other extraordinary situations of law and abuse that were quite evident. And with Ambassador Herbst jotting each one of them down to make sure that my memory would not falter at this particular point. We talked to all the Europeans, we gained their insights and what they were going to testify. And then Ambassador Herbst had a very significant and unusual reception, really on the spur of the moment. It was a time in which Victor Pinchot, who was the son-in-law of President Kuchma, had been invited, and he in fact came. And he approached me very grimly and said, "You have told my father-in-law that there would be severe consequences in the event this was not a free and fair election." "What do you mean? What are the consequences going to be?" And so I said, "Well, sir, I really can't specify. The president really hasn't outlined." He said it could deal with passports, visas, and so forth. Victor was, if not a multi-millionaire, perhaps even a billionaire at that point. A very, very wealthy man. So, Victor, being a very practical politician, I suppose, said, "Well, I have a deal for you. At 5 p.m. on the night after the election, I have 2 TV stations, 2 networks, as a matter of fact, in Ukraine. And I would like to give you a half an hour to speak to the people of Ukraine about your impressions of the election." Now imagine that, having an American come in and give a report of this variety after what was going to be a rather difficult night, to say the least, because as the returns began to come in, they didn't come in. The scoreboards were blank. At 2 a.m., there was nothing being heard from the east part of Ukraine, only a few fragmentary results from Kiev. It was apparent that somebody was waiting for the right votes to come in before there were significant results up on the board. It was apparent that President Yushchenko had won, and yet at the same time, there was not to be the count that we would receive 24 hours later. I described all of this with the benefit of John Herbst, literally detail by detail, and his Foreign Service people. And we were able to outline, I believe, very graphically what we had seen and what many people came to believe was the case of that election. I was tremendously gratified, and this is why it's a thrill to see Colin Powell here tonight, that as I got reports of what he was saying back in the United States, it coincided almost perfectly with what I was saying there in Ukraine. That was a real thrill. But the fact is, it was a mess. And this led to the people coming out, as they have been coming out this year, into the Kiev squares and protesting. It was cold by the time we got to that stage in life. But as a matter of fact, the election was finally postponed, annulled, and laid aside, and a second election was held, which led, in fact, to Yushchenko coming into power, and likewise, Madam Timoshenko, who was a candidate for president, as it turns out, this Sunday. I had just one further footnote to this, and after all of this experience in Ukraine, which was very exciting, and the work of the people out in the streets, as well as the people conducting the second election and all the rest of it. I went over to Ukraine in 2005 in August, but I was accompanied by a junior senator from the state of Illinois. As some of you recall, in mid-year 2005, John Kerry and I were joined by Senator Barack Obama on the Foreign Relations Committee. Barack was very steadfast and waiting through all the questioning by everybody, and very patiently after 2 hours we get his questions in, and I thanked him for his faithfulness, because everybody else had often left by this time. So Barack reciprocated by saying, Nick, I understand you go to Russia and Ukraine and other places like that each summer to take a look at nuclear weapons and how things are progressing there. I'd like to go with you this summer. And so I said, well, that would be fine. So as a matter of fact, Barack Obama joined me. We had a difficult experience in Perm as we came through Russia, where we were detained, so to speak, by people who would not let our Air Force plane fly. They were trying to get away to Kiev at that point, but there was some dispute. Some thought that I was a spy or some allegation of that variety. A tough initiation for Barack, first time in Russia, on to Ukraine. And here we saw President Poroshenko and Julia Tymoshenko both had one message, and that is at the end of the year, the Russians are going to cut off our natural gas. And we need help. And they would go to maps and point out where lines might come from. And we pointed out it was pretty late in the game to get that kind of relief by December. Indeed, the Russians did cut off the gas. As you remember, at the end of 2005, this affected not only Ukraine, but it affected Germany, the Baltic states, all the others. Same line of fire that we have presently ahead of us, and we hope not the same result. And as a result of all of that, our relations with Ukraine, Liban and John Herbst was a critical factor throughout all of this in making a difference in that situation. So I mentioned him because he exemplifies in my mind the Foreign Service officer who became an ambassador, who is now been involved in education at the National Defense University, still working with young people, thinking about diplomacy, thinking about America's place in the world, but thinking also about the aspirations of other people in the world that we can help. They've been inspired by the example of America as expressed this evening. And I thank each one of you so much for your devotion to our country, for the specific skills you brought to us in language skills, language training, the geography and the scholarship that are a part of your service. Finally, the human touch that makes such a difference. You're magnificent, and I celebrate with you the 90th anniversary. Thanks so much.
And just treasure your contributions to this day. What a lesson in history and how relevant to everything that is about to happen this weekend. Standing here behind this podium reminds me a little bit of the podium in the Rose Garden when King was just in that one day all the souls of Latin. Very tall sentences. Our next speaker, also tall, is a very familiar face in this building, former Secretary of State Colin Powell. Came here as the 65th Secretary of State, as a retired four-star general in the United States Army and a top national security advisor at the White House. He was, of course, already an experienced and admired leader. His early focus, though, on expanding the Foreign Service was truly visionary. He was a tireless manager, he was a motivator of people, at a time when this was really vital, critical. As Secretary, he was one of the most effective advocates, as Secretary Kerry has said, for securing the necessary resources for the people and the programs of the department and of USAID. He truly made a difference in moving this organizational structure forward, bringing respect to the department and to the people who work here for all of the foreign affairs agencies of the United States. With a few exceptions during his musical performance, he said, as in some we won't talk about something else. So please welcome a revered leader of this institution and of many others in this country, former Secretary of State, Colin Powell.
Thank you very much, Andre, for the kind introduction, and Mr. Secretary, thank you for welcoming me again to the State Department. It's a great pleasure to be here with Dick, Chris, and some of the others, and around. I see so many friends of past years, not only in the State Department, but as National Security Advisor as well as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I was a little late arriving because I've been in New York for a good part of the day, up in Harlem, about a mile from where we're going, and an institution called the Colin Powell School of Civic and Global Leadership. And my wonderful alma mater, City College of New York, is 80% minority with respect to the student body, and 50% of the students are immigrants. They're not the children of immigrants, they are immigrants. I love being back there because this really is the future of our country. The wonderful diversity of ours that has fueled us generation after generation of young people who come here, their parents come here, and they are hungry. I stopped in front of the college today while I was getting ready for my board of visitors meeting, and some young man walked by, and I stopped him. It was an African American kid with a little diamond in his ear. Diamond in his ear. I overlooked that, but I don't do that. But I asked him what he was studying. He said, electrical engineering. I said, what did you start out in? Mechanical, but I shifted to electrical. How long have you been here? 4 years. I transferred from Staten Island to college, so they bounce around the city of New York. And I said, where do you live? Down on the Lower East Side. I said, with your parents? I said, my father, I don't know. I've never known him. It's never my life. But my mother was. And she is the one who's kept me here and kept me in play. And I see this not only in my college at City College of New York, but I have 9 other schools named after me, elementary and middle schools. And as I go around the country, I see these young people who still believe in this country. You know, we say, well, we're down, we're out. No, we're not. What are you talking about? And one of the lines I use in my remarks is, if you want to know what America is all about, just go to any one of our consular offices or embassy offices and see the line that's waiting there every single morning. And when they get to that junior foreign service officer who's behind that counter and ask, what do you want? I want to go to America. They don't say I want to go to Moscow. I want to go to America. This still is that remarkable land of opportunity, that remarkable land of freedom, that remarkable land that is an inspiration to the rest of the world. And it is astonishing that I could rise to the positions that I occupy in this country. And it wasn't easy. When I was a young man and knew where I wanted to go, and I went into the City College of New York and graduated from there. When I became chairman, people would come up to me and say, well, what year did you graduate from West Point? Are you kidding me, West Point? Well, did you go to VMI, the Virginia Military Institute? How about Texas A&M? How about the Citadel? No, when I entered college, black people couldn't go to the schools. Oh, where'd you go? City College of New York. Never heard of it. No, you didn't. Let me tell you about it, because it gave me a public school education for free. Public school education that the citizens of New York City and New York State said was vital. This is an investment in the future of our country, the future of our society. And we still have that remarkable place that took a while before they would let me into one of these schools. But nevertheless, I was able to do it because we were changing, we changed, we constantly are adjusting, we are constantly renewing ourselves. And one of the things that renews this society of ours so significantly every single day, which we still don't fully understand in this country, and you are in the front lines of it, is immigration. Immigration and immigration reform has got to be one of our highest priorities because it's keeping this country alive. On CCNY, but I'm very, very proud of it. And people will come up and say, when you were a kid growing up in the South Bronx, did you dream you could go and become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Armed Forces of the United States? Yeah, there I was. I was standing on the corner of 163rd and Kelly. And I said to myself, Self, who's going to grow up and become chairman? When you're tired of that, you're going to become Secretary of State. It's just not the way life unfolds. I tell youngsters all across this country, you have such opportunity in this land of ours like no other land. I was with a Japanese gentleman earlier this evening, a very wealthy individual, and I'm going to be seeing him shortly over in Japan. Just making the point to him, unless Japan sort of understands what's happening with the demographics of the country, we're going to be in trouble. But America, we are not going to have that problem because we pressure constantly. And you guys are in the front lines of all this. I was so proud to be selected by President Bush to be the Secretary of State. On my first day here, one of the early questions I got from the Foreign Service officer, what do we call you, General or Mr. Secretary? I like General, but you better call me Mr. Secretary. Because that's what I am, I'm the Secretary. And I took that responsibility very deeply in my heart. I had a letter waiting for me that I shared with John from the grand old man of foreign policy, George Kemp. And he said to me, remember what your job is, to be the senior diplomat and foreign policy advisor to the president. But you are also running an organization that needs leadership, needs management, and you have to take care of those people. And that meant a great deal to me because it reflected my military background as well. Now, the Foreign Service was nervous. No, you weren't. No. Because I came in with a whole bunch of military guys. I had Rich Armitage, you will all remember Rich Armitage, the Navy High Academy graduate. I had Grant Green, I am, who was also an Army colonel who worked for me. The fellow who was in charge of legislative affairs was a Marine colonel. And you all thought we were taking over. We were. Because we really had some problems that we had to deal with. And I think those of you who were there at the time will recognize that. We had the SOS report. How many of you remember that? When the Foreign Service itself was saying, we've got to save our department, we've got to do things. And we did. We started working on the diplomatic readiness initiative to finally get ahead of attrition. We had to work on the information system. One of my greatest achievements, I think, is getting 44,000 new computers in the Department of State when I discovered that Wang computer. No offense intended, but Congress had started to think they should run the department. And so I found myself saddled with a few laws that Congress had passed. And everybody in the room may not agree with what I'm about to say, but I had to deal with it. One law said that you guys have messed up the diplomatic telecommunication system so that the CIA and the State Department, you change responsibility every year as to who's in charge. And we don't like that, so we've now created an office in OMB that will be in charge of the communication system. And you, General Powell, Secretary Powell, the only thing you can do is nominate who's going to run it, but it's going to be nominated. And so we fought that, and we solved the problem. We had a runoff here in the department, we did the center, we did the CIA, and we solved that. We put the computers in about 2 years, did it all in-house, and it's been very, very successful, very proud of that. They also said, and here's where John and I might have a disagreement, they said, you will have a second deputy. And Rich Armitage didn't like that idea. And frankly, I didn't like that idea because I tend to like straight lines without too much confusion of authority. But it was the law. What was it going to do? And my lawyers kept coming in saying, you've got to nominate somebody to be the deputy secretary, the second deputy. All right. So I called Grant Green in, who was the M. I said, Grant, the good news and bad news. The good news is I'm nominating you to be the new second deputy secretary of state of the Department of State. The bad news is I'm going to make sure your nomination never goes to the committee. And I did. Now, subsequent leaders in the department had chosen to fill that position, but I had to deal with Rich Armitage, and we did. But we worked hard. It meant so much to us to infuse the department with a spirit that we care about you, and the Congress cares about you, and the American people care about you. And what you are doing every single day is so essential to the well-being of our country. The Foreign Service for the last 90 years, and for long before that, before you were called, in fact, they didn't get called out, you were in the forefront of America's activities with the rest of the world. I've been called often the reluctant general. You've got to believe it. I hate that. And I've fought with it. I've been in wars. I've been injured in wars. I've been wounded in wars. I want to be part of it. And so call me the reluctant general all you want, because I always want to see if there's not some peaceful way to solve problems through politics or diplomacy. And very often it's 3 steps forward, 4 steps back, 3 steps forward, only 2 steps back. but you got to do it. It's what you all do so well. One of the great joys in my life is having been given the privilege of representing you and having been given the privilege of being your leader and to watch you at work. Whether it's a John Hurst, when I can tell it over 30 minutes worth of take root or story about you, I tell what happened after that. But I can give you story after story. Wonderful ambassadors and junior officers who just do such a magnificent job. And one of my favorites was some of the old timers we remember is shortly after I took over, the president was going to Mexico for his first trip. And I invited the president to come to the State Department and get briefed by our people over here. And get a chance for him to come and see the State Department. And President Bush agreed. And I went to the staff meeting the next morning. And I said, the president's coming for a briefing on Mexico next Tuesday, and we got to get ready for it. And so the assistant secretary, deputy assistant secretary said, we're working on it. We'll get the charts, and there's no charts. Well, I'll brief. No, you're not going to brief. Go get the 2 junior desk officers who know the Mexico portfolio. They're going to brief. Well, we don't know who they are. Look here. Just go get the 2 junior desk officers, and they'll brief. Yes, sir. When do you want a pre-brief? I don't want a pre-brief. When do you want to see the briefing? I don't want to see the briefing. When do you want to see the charts? I don't want to see the charts. There are any video charts. Just have these 2 young people show up when the president arrives and tell them to start talking about Mexico. I'm not an idiot. I briefed the president on what we were doing. I've got a little bit of political sense. And so on the appointed morning, these 2 young desk officers sat across the table in the conference room with President Bush and briefed on Mexico. I didn't have the slightest doubt that these kids would do a beautiful job because they had 3 days to learn everything you could possibly know about Mexico. And so I just turned loose. Mr. President, so, go. And what are they doing? And the president asked them a few questions, and they handled them fine. And then they left the room. The president left and congratulated everybody, and he went back to the White House. And I didn't follow up because I didn't have to know what was happening. They ran back to their cubicles. First, they called their wives. They called their mothers. And then they just started talking to their buddies. And the most amazing thing is it went around the building almost instantly. And what I tried to convey, and what is so important, I know John's doing it today, and his remarks certainly reflected that, is we trust you. We trust each and every one of you. And we need you to trust us. And you trust us because we will give you the right policies to follow. We will give you the purposes we want you to achieve, we want you to help achieve. We will kill ourselves up in the hill getting the resources we need to accomplish so that you can do your jobs. There's nothing worse than a military background than having a mission, but you don't take care of the troops, you don't give them what they need to get the mission done. And we work hard to do that. I love this particular room because some of my old colleagues are afraid I'm about to remember my old Ben Franklin speech, but I won't. I swore in 147 people in the 4 years that I was here. And I always did it, and if I couldn't, then Richard would very seldom let anyone else do it. The simple reason that I wanted to convey to the incoming Assistant Secretary and the Secretary Ambassador the trust and respect I had for them and for their service. And I wanted them to know this laying on of hands was a bond between the 7th floor, wherever you may be. I swore to every A100 class. Same thing, because we're one team, one family. And although we celebrate the Foreign Service this evening, I'm sure you'll all join me in something that I felt was very important at the time, and that was to recognize the civil service, to recognize that we don't get it done alone. We're one team, one fight. I remember when I came to we're not going to call it Foreign Service Day anymore, we're going to call it Foreign Affairs Day. Whoa. Oh, bad. No one will show up. Okay. We changed to Foreign Affairs Day, and the civil service were actually thrilled to be included. And our Foreign Service Nationals and the others who support us. We're all part of one team, one fight, and that fight is serving the people of the United States of America. I used to have fun every morning when I have my morning staff meeting, and I sometimes just fool around. came in the morning and they're all like, English under assistant secretary there, and they know 9 languages. And I looked at them, I had about 40 in the room, I said, okay, how many of you guys saw World Wrestling Federation last night? And they started staring at me, you missed it? Oh my gosh, you missed it. And he's going crazy, we know he's crazy this time. And I said, it was terrific, Hulk Hogan fought The Undertaker. And they looked at me like I'm out of my mind. I said, what's wrong? Don't you ever watch World Wrestling Federation? And the answer was, no. And I said, I watched that. I watched NASCAR. I watched a lot of other things. And the reason is I want to know why 30,000 of my fellow citizens would go on a Monday night to sit and watch this ballet that's been cooked. And I said, and the reason is I just want to see what my fellow citizens are doing, and I want you to understand they're the ones we work for. They're the ones we represent. Don't ever forget who we work for and who we represent. Not the folks in Washington, the folks all across the country. And the beauty of all this is that you all have done it in such a magnificent way. You've done it in a magnificent way for so many, many years. And that's why I'm confident that the 90 years of achievement that you have amassed will be for 94 years of achievement. And that you will continue to represent the interests of our country around the world. That you will continue to build on the tradition and the heritage that is now yours. And that in the future, you will make the sacrifices. You will put our folks in harm's way. We'll do everything to protect them, but it's still a dangerous business that we are in. But we thank you for that service. I personally, as a former secretary, thank you for that service. And God bless the Foreign Service. Keep it up.
Chris Van Hollen, Dick Luger, and of course John Kerry. What great speakers, what a wonderful way to celebrate 90 years of foreign service, of foreign affairs and diplomacy and development. And for all of you who put yourselves in harm's way, who sacrifice the families and the principles, thank you so much for your service, what you do for America. Enjoy your dessert. Thank you all for being here. It's been my privilege to have been part of this.